Say, so the Clean Water Act, what is that supposed to bring about? What is it supposed to guarantee for the communities of America?
All waters are supposed to be fishable and swimmable. You know, I like to say the Clean Water Act was a zoning law, right? It zoned the highest and best use for water. We're all used to highest and best use for land, park, residential, industrial, whatever it might be. The Clean Water Act was a zoning law. It said all water should be fishable and swimmable. And
would you swim in the GOWANUS, Maureen, today? Would you recommend that for anyone?
So, in the process of sort of getting everybody's heads around this idea, it has taken decades, really, to get municipalities of all stripe and size to eventually make the capital investments to control pollution either from a sewage system or industrial waste or runoff from agriculture, whatever it might be, and get the material out of the water, keep it out of the water, and allow the water to regenerate itself. New York is as far behind on that as almost anybody. Now, what usually happens is New York plays this very interesting possum game. They just pretend they can't do it, and then the federal government shows up with the money. You know, they just drag their feet and whine and complain and moan, and I would have said something else before moan, but we're probably getting recorded. And so eventually all these orders, 1977, 1984, when the Clean Water Act finally got passed with a requirement that New York build Red Hook or get a raw sewage cap. All of these things just pushed and pushed, but it wasn't unless federal money showed up they wouldn't do it.
But I'm under the impression that even today, more than 300 million gallons of raw sewage runoff still go into the Gowanus Canal annually. Is that correct,
That's
Maureen?
correct. So we've got combined sewers, and while most of what we would call dry weather is controlled, so on a day-to-day basis, the pipes are big enough, the plants are big enough. But when it rains and all that added rainwater is put into the same pipes as the sanitary sewage, it's too much. And so the combined material comes out, outfalls, and the rainwater is mixed with everything else, and out it comes.
And it's not just sewage, it's also automotive chemicals, laundry chemicals, you know, all sorts of terrible things for the environment.
Everything you can think of that's still laying around on the streets.
Medical waste.
Deposition, everything that gets dropped out of other things, yes. Things that are, some of what's being flushed down systems now. Grease, I mean everything. It's all coming out into the Gowanus.
And when you say, you know, you brought up this issue of wet weather when this happens, and that makes me think of something that we're facing, climate change, right? With intensifying storms, intensifying waterfall. And, you know, I wanted to ask you a little bit about something we addressed in the letter, which is the Biden administration's position on climate change and environmental justice. Because we are in a unique moment where environmental issues have kind of broken into the mainstream. And so what is the Biden administration's goal on this, and how could the EPA be oriented to better serve our community?
What's happened is the failure to meet the statutory requirements for, say, the last 50 years, 50, 40 years, however you want to calculate it, is now being compounded by the realities. You don't need a statute to know it rains more, it floods more, the sea level is rising. So I like to say Gowanus has 4 kinds of water. It's got sanitary sewage, it's got storm water, it's got sea level rise, and it's got surge water, storm surge. You know, 4 kinds. So all of that water is just compounding and compounding and compounding. The sanitary flow is full of pollution. The storm water is full of pollution. The seawater is going to flood everything, and the surge water floods everything.
And then on top of that, so that it is a FEMA flood zone A, that whole region, and this is the region that the city wants to bring 30,000 new people into. Now, on top of that, we have this other major challenge, and that speaks to the long industrial legacy of Gowanus. So could you speak a little bit to that side
So
of things?
that sort of goes to the ongoing Superfund type failures. In addition to what's going on with the water, the soil around the Gowanus has been getting soaked and soaked and soaked with industrial residuals now for, forget 50 years, that goes back 100 and some odd years.
Talking about tanneries and
dye plants, manufactured gas plants. Remember when the manufactured gas plants operated and there were leftover chemicals after getting the town gas out that went into the gas pipes.
and that was a process where they took coal.
They gasified it essentially. They burned it up enough to make gas come off, and then all the residuals still had some material in them. Coal tar was thought of as a valuable commodity at one time, and that could be reused in dye factories and toluene factories, which made munitions. TNT, toluene is one of the T's in TNT. So all
And what do we know about those things today?
Cancerous, among other things. So those are all soaked into the soil around the canal and have been seeping into the canal for decades, just decades. And I have to tell you, I mean, Superfund was passed in 1980. The United States Air Force had 30, 20 Superfund sites, and New York had 0 until 2010. And when I think of what it took for this community to get the Superfund listing, it's pretty horrifying.
And we have to recognize some of our Voice of Gowanus members, including Maureen Donnelly, who played an instrumental role in getting that site listed. Katya Kelly, Margaret Martinez is not here right now.
Exactly. So everything that's in the soil seeps into the water. Everything that's in the bed of the canal seeps up into the water. Now EPA is ostensibly doing a cleanup of the canal itself, but what's called the uplands areas have been left to the states. Now the states are just totally conflicted out. National Grid, which owns the manufactured gas plant sites, is not paying for any of that. They're outlaying the money initially and getting totally reimbursed in your gas bills.
Right.
You all are paying for all of that cleanup by National Grid, and then whatever cleanup limitations are afoot, because National Grid only wants to spend as much as it thinks it can get the Public Service Commission to pay it back, EPA is now trying to leverage the developers. So one of the reasons we wanted to write the IG letter is because, in effect, EPA has either unwittingly or just, it doesn't, I don't know how they feel about it, but they have become proponents of the development because in order to get the Superfund cleanup they think they need, they've got to replace National Grid money with developer money.